Chapter 19. A Place at the Table. "What are you doing with the red table?" were the first words out of Ellen Rakitin's mouth when the two of us were introduced. A behind-the-scenes powerhouse, Ellen, co-creator and producer of The Oprah Winfrey Show for 23 years, had been referred to me by Ken Hertz, the entertainment lawyer and branding maestro, who had known Will since his Fresh Prince of Bel-Air days and still works with our family. Ken's instincts were usually gold, so I listened when he said that Ellen was someone I should meet. What was I doing with the red table? Ellen was talking about a Mother's Day special that my mother, daughter, and I had posted online some years earlier. Nothing. Well, you should be. I laughed. Ellen was serious. Striking with her long golden waves of hair, she had a combination of confidence, inquisitiveness, and assertiveness that made me lean in. Red Table Talks' origin story began one day when Willow, then a preteen, said out of nowhere, "I want to know who you are outside of just being my mother." What a beautiful question for a young daughter to ask her mother. She wanted to know who I was before I became a wife and mother, as in, who were you before you came into all of this? Her question floored me. It struck me how many daughters don't really know who their mother is, and how important it is that they do. "Wow," was my first response. My second was, in order to know my story, you gotta know Gammy's story too. This was going to be a deep conversation, I realized. Why wouldn't we, as mothers, find the time to share our journeys with our daughters? Was it because we judged our stories and couldn't get beyond whatever shame lingered? Was it because we couldn't see the value and necessity of our experiences? All of us have chapters in our lives we wish we could erase. Yet those are the chapters in which we slayed our most menacing dragons. Those are the moments that, if they didn't kill us, made us stronger. The key is to set aside our shame and find a safe space where we can talk freely and openly. In the process, through everyday storytelling, our daughters will have a chance to honor and accept our journeys as worthy and embrace whatever strength they find to take on their own journeys. When I told my mother that I wanted to have this conversation, she was fully on board. For Willow, getting to hear the history of her mother and grandmother would give her the gift of knowing her matriarchal legacy, and in turn, teach her more about herself. It occurred to me that it would be good to preserve this conversation by filming it. By sharing it widely, I hope to encourage other mothers to get past the fear of telling their stories to their daughters, and maybe inspire them to have their own intergenerational conversations on their own terms. At this point in my life, I'd come to see that the heroine's journey, for most of us, will not look demure, passive, or safe. True, we often deny parts of ourselves and our stories by having had to live up to the standards of being a good woman. Instead, I hope that if we could share our unvarnished stories with one another, Willow, Gammy, and me, we could shine a light on how multidimensional our journeys can be. We could check our self-judgment at the door and the judgment of others while we were at it. And this is how the concept of the three of us at a round table was created. The idea was inspired by the universal kitchen table, where women gather to cook, talk, share stories, and commune. This was the classic dinner table, where families come together and tell the stories of their day. With a round table, there is no hierarchy. Nobody sits at the head. Everyone's place is equal. The choice of red was feminine. Red for roses and the red-hot flame of a woman's passion. The red table concept also conjured the feeling of sitting around the campfire at night, the magic of people captivating one another with story. The tradition is in our DNA, dating back to prehistoric times when our ancestors gathered around the fire to dance and sing with ritual and ceremony. The red table representing fire, safety, and warmth, is also the color of the blood that represents life, connection, and transformation. Through communication, through confession, and through expression, the red table is where we can purify our hearts and our souls and clear up the confusing dynamics within us and between other people. And so, conceived as a place for truth and unfiltered dialogue, the first ever Red Table Talk was birthed, a Mother's Day gift to women of all ages. Over the years, Gammy and I had never talked at length about her story before becoming my mother, her own traumas of being a teenage mom, or the details of her addiction and recovery. I knew parts of it, of course, the parts I was there for, but she had never pieced everything together in so clear and honest a way as she did that day. Up until this conversation, Gammy would bristle if there was any reference to her as a recovering addict, rather than recognition of her miraculous journey to sobriety. Seeing my mother overcome her shame and narrate her history in front of cameras and to her grandchild was a cathartic moment for me, and I believe for her. When you bring your story from the shadows and into the light, you step out of your own handmade prison and give the experience that you once thought shameful wings. And that's what Willow and I got to witness, as did viewers who reached out to express how moving Adrian's story had been for them. Many shared their own struggles with addiction and their family dynamics. Willow was amazing. On her own, 12 years old, she came to the red table prepared with in-depth questions she had written down in advance. Willow was enthralled with our stories and listened with enthusiastic curiosity and great empathy. The husband and wife production team who helped turn my vision into reality was Mike and Moni Vargas. Their creativity and dedication made the results more than I could have asked for. The effort was meant to be a one-off, although after it streamed, we received offers to create a show around the concept. But Willow was still so young, and I just didn't think it was time. Besides, I felt we had accomplished our initial goal. And that was that, or so I thought. 5 years later, when Ellen Racketon told me I should be doing something with the red table, the timing was different. Willow was turning 18, and I was seeking my next step. Ellen was also persuasive. You know, I believe that this concept, 3 women from the same family, 3 generations, sitting at a table and talking about important subjects, is a really powerful idea for a show. There was just something magical in the way she presented this to me. I opened my mind to what might happen. From there, we all went to work, and Red Table Talk was reimagined as a non-traditional talk show with topics explored from our different, unfiltered perspectives. True to its origin story, the show was shot in a warmly lit room in our home, and we kept it real and welcoming with the intimacy of a family gathering. Within a month, and after receiving offers from numerous outlets, we decided to go with Facebook. I felt that Mina Lefevre, head of Facebook Watch, got the show right away and was open to giving us, Ellen, Miguel Melendez, and me, free creative range. Miguel and I had produced Queen Latifah's talk show and knew how important and rare this kind of freedom was. What's more, it was the most lucrative deal offered that also let us retain ownership of the brand. Once I'd talked to Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook at the time, and an immediate champion of the show, I knew we would be in good hands. They ordered 13 episodes, and we went to work. This started off as a passion project, and for the first season, I assumed it would remain that way. And all my imaginings for my future, becoming the host of a talk show, had never been on my radar, nor for Gammy and Willow. They were thrilled, and we loved doing it. Although, when we made the deal with Facebook, we had no idea that it would turn into our day jobs. We never suspected how successful it was going to be. During the run-up to shooting the first season of Red Table Talk, I'd been grappling with something of a health condition that I'd been ignoring for a while. It showed up one day when my hairdresser at the time noticed a big indentation on the side of my head near my temple, where I had a significant amount of hair loss. She pointed it out, and I looked in the mirror, felt it with my hand, and said, it's like I've lost some bone density. And we could see that subtly the side of my head was sort of caving in. I was concerned about the bald patch and the indentation and started watching both more closely. My hunch was that maybe I was wrapping my hair too tight at night. That was an easy fix. Besides, in these days I had so much hair that I didn't have cause to worry. No big deal. Even when I started to see other little plugs of hair falling out, I still didn't stress about it too much. Though I fully intended to follow up with a doctor to look into hormonal changes, as pretty much everybody assumed it was, just hormones, I kept faith that whatever was happening would correct itself. And I was right. After a month or so, the condition went away, much to my relief. Years passed. In late 2017, there came a jolt I couldn't ignore. I'm in the shower on this particular morning while spending time by myself in Utah, enjoying the winter season that I love so very much. As soon as I start to wash and rinse my hair, I'm shocked to see that I have a wad of hair in my hands, with more falling on the tile of the shower and flowing down the drain. In a body-shaking panic, I freeze. Though I'm scared to continue to rinse my hair, I proceed as delicately as possible, which does little to stem the amount of hair sloughing off my head. I've been in panic mode in my life, but nothing like this. My heart is quaking with, oh my God, what is wrong with me? That's when I flash on Pac, first getting alopecia from the trauma of being beat up by the police in Northern California. Of course, Pac looked good bald. The thought that I could be suffering from the same issues is not acceptable, so I stick to the theory of hormones. As I get out of the shower, I pat my hair with a towel and wrap it loosely. I'm not touching a strand. I found a doctor in Utah who believed I was suffering from alopecia areata, but that it was probably temporary and brought on by stress. He told me there were steroid shots I could get to stem the loss and injected me with my first round. For close to 2 weeks, I didn't even look at my head. That's how scared I was to confront reality. Finally, I unwrapped my hair and gently started to brush it. No reprieve. Hair came out in chunks. I could see the round circles where the roots of the hair had come out entirely. Refusing to go into a depression over what I believed was caused by aging and years of overworking my hair, I decided, what the hell, I'll cut it. Problem solved. I still had a lot of hair, and my short cut was styled to cover the patches where the hair loss had happened. For that I felt lucky and grateful. Soon enough, it very much felt that my hair was coming back, healthy and strong. Was it the shots? I didn't know, but I was thrilled that my hair was growing back. Time would prove that the issue was far more complicated. In the meantime, I kept my hair in a hot little style and put my focus on the exciting adventure of RTT. One of my goals in framing the tone of the show's conversation had been inspired by the candor and wisdom shared with me after I'd reached out to 3 special women during a tough time. Each of them, Pauletta Washington, Selma Hayek, and Ruby Dee, had provided me with a safe space for real talk. Ruby Dee was one of the first women to see past my usual facade. We always ran into each other at industry events, but I had never had the chance to speak to her at length. At one such event, I went over to speak to Ruby, and she took my hand, looking at me with veteran discernment. Leaning in, she softly told me, "You make it look easy, but I know that it's not." Damn, I thought. I'm found out. I will never forget how Ruby looked at me with so much understanding. that lovely, generous, woman-to-woman nod of knowing. This gesture planted a seed in my heart that let me know her door of earned wisdom was open to me any time. Before long, I walked through that door. In her late 80s, a fierce powerhouse, Ruby Dee had a multifaceted career. Iconic actress, poet, playwright, producer, and lifelong activist. For her nearly 56 years of marriage to Ozzie Davis, who passed away at age 87 in 2005, the two were so intricately linked as husband and wife and as creative partners that you rarely heard either of them mentioned without the other. What I took from Ruby was an assurance that marriage was hard and not a linear journey. Marriage has multiple ups and downs and stops and starts and changes through the seasons. Sitting from where I was at the time, I had to ask, do you have any regrets? If you could go back and do it differently, would you? Ruby said something profound. One of my biggest regrets is that I wish I had laughed with him more. Once Ozzie was on his deathbed, none of the contentious, painful times they'd been through mattered anymore. All that mattered was how profoundly, passionately, and fully they had loved each other through everything. Her cautionary advice was simple. Just keep that in mind. Laugh now, because you're gonna laugh later. In other words, all the troubles that are making you cry now, with wisdom and time, will make you laugh in days to come. Pauletta Washington, whose arts education began at North Carolina School for the Arts and then Juilliard, had a career as an actress and musician before she married Denzel. One of the takeaways from our conversations was how having a spiritual center was important in every union. Selma Hayek reinforced the importance of staying true to oneself and also not overlooking the things in a marriage that are going right. The most wonderful part of having these free-flowing conversations with women I respect was the realization that my challenges didn't make me as special as I thought I was. My conversations with these three also made me wonder, why don't women open up and share our experiences and wisdom with one another more often and in a deep way? That's what I wanted for Red Table Talk. The gift of RTT was that for the first 2 seasons, it wasn't a job as much as a continuation of the meaningful, healing, entertaining exchanges I'd begun to have with my mother and my daughter and my close female friends before there was a table and a camera. What a joy getting to go to the table with my mother and daughter. Naturally inquisitive, I found that getting to be part of unfiltered conversations put me in my happy place. Gammy offers strong opinions along with well-earned wisdom, while Willow has superpowers of empathy and vulnerability combined with fierce intelligence that draw in all age groups. The three of us bring our different strengths and points of view to the table. Our guests, from the start, came from a wide range of backgrounds and ages, and were both women and men. Experts, authors, friends, folks with unforgettable stories, celebrities who needed a safe space to let down their guard. Many of our guests would say that being at the table led to a catharsis. More than a few quipped afterward, "This is better than therapy." RTT became a forum for us to meet our audience members where they were in their lives, and they could meet us and our guests where we were. The connection was powerful. Our engagement through comments and our viral sharing of episodes told us that our subject matter resonated in so many demographics around the world. After 2 seasons, viewership had risen to an accumulated 265 million. Red Table communities began to sprout all over Facebook. RTT, as a brand, blossomed into a lucrative asset for our new producing company, Westbrook. Co-founded by Will and me, along with Kosaku Yada and Miguel Melendez, with our last 3-year deal closing at close to $100 million. One of the hardest lessons for me as I moved into my late 40s was overcoming my fear of being vulnerable in public. When you are playing a role in a story that's not your own, it's easier to open up in order to bring that character to life. But when it's your story and you aren't playing a role, it's not so simple. Gammy, Willow, and I could bring insights to the table that often reflected each generation. My mother was a classic baby boomer who had clear ideas about what was wrong and what was right. Willow, a Gen Zer, was all about challenging and questioning that which was supposedly right or wrong. As a Gen Xer, I sat in the middle and enjoyed the interplay. The topics we tackled never followed a formula. Most of the time, and I give so much credit to Ellen and our team for this, we approached sensitive subject matter that was considered taboo, but was very much in the public mind. We hosted parents who had lost their beloved sons or daughters to suicide, police violence, sexual assault, or domestic abuse. We delved into topics like the rise of white supremacy and hate in America, how families can do more to support their LGBTQIA+ family members, what polyamory is all about, and why it's more common than you know, women in porn, the mental health epidemic happening around the world, and narcissism and its varieties, just to name a few. We welcomed all topics and all people. In the early days of RTT, the programming flowed from our personal interests, mainly what Gammy, Willow, and I were thinking about or were going through. At the end of 2019, a lot was going on with me, though I wasn't yet sure how to talk about it. Here I was in a state that I'd never imagined for myself, married but not, and alone. At this point, my intense focus was on my inner life, after I'd taken a vow of celibacy as a more conscious approach to my spiritual work. In addition to plant medicine, I was in therapy and working at detaching from the life I'd known before, which became increasingly difficult when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Up until this time, Will had been working and away for the most part, but when the shutdown happened, we were under the same roof and together for an extended length of time, which hadn't happened in a while. We both thought it was important to create a sense of security by hunkering down at the house, which became a pod for our extended family and friends during this uncertain time. In early 2020, while most of the industry had closed down, RTT was able to be mostly self-contained as a production because we shot the show at our house and we were able to bring in experts and guests via video technology. Our first show during this season, Managing Our Anxiety and Fear During COVID-19, included Jay Shetty, a former monk turned successful life coach, author, and podcaster, and Dr. Ramani Durvasula, clinical psychologist, author, professor, and podcaster of Navigating Narcissism. We didn't want to ignore the elephant in the living room. That was the isolation of being in quarantine during a worldwide pandemic. So we met it head on, with topics that included what COVID actually is, how it spread, and how to prevent getting sick. We also addressed ways to cope with addiction while in isolation, how to handle relationships, and differences in views about the pandemic itself. We tried to infuse some humor into what we filmed during that time. We called one episode A Girls Trip Coronavirus Quarantine Reunion, which is just what it was, a reunion with my castmates, Tiffany Haddish, Queen Latifah, and Regina Hall from Girls Trip, a movie we'd made 4 years earlier, held on Zoom. It was hilarious and inappropriate, as only the four of us can be when we're together. We started laughing about, what else? Hair. Latifah was complaining about having to press her own hair. Tiff was showing off her quarantine weave, while Regina proudly shared her simple do. I tried to change the subject, shrugging and pointing to the ball cap I'd put on, saying it was better than the scarf I'd been wearing. Regina reminded us of how envious she was of my hair and my edges. Not anymore, I came back, faster and louder than I'd intended. Nobody seemed to have heard me, thank goodness. Right before lockdown, my hair had started to fall out again. I resumed the steroid shots. The prognosis, considering that alopecia is an autoimmune condition and every case is different, was hard to determine. My hair loss could go on for a short time, a long time, or the rest of my life. It could get better or become more severe. My doctor told me, we'll just have to wait and see. Later on, I discovered there were issues with my gut that were contributing to hair loss and possibly to the indentations that appeared every once in a while. Once I cleaned aspects of my diet that were supposed to be healthy but were actually hurting me, my health, emotionally and physically, rebounded. As for my hair, I was still waiting and seeing. The only other memorable episode of Red Table Talk during the COVID-19 quarantine season aired in July. It was titled, Jada Takes Herself to the Table. It is responsible for introducing a new meaning to the word entanglement into popular culture. You're welcome. In the spring of 2020, there had been a surge of interests in the entertainment press as to what had happened 2 years earlier due to statements made by my former entanglee. My immediate reaction was, why now? Are you kidding me? I never thought he was built like that. On top of the fact that this was water under the bridge, I had tried my best to respect his privacy without even considering my own at times. But as the saying goes, all is fair. In my experience, talking back to a media frenzy is a no-win venture because you only make a story bigger and more susceptible to fictional add-ons. However, in this instance, I was ready to explain my actions, not with blame or self-defense, but by taking responsibility. With all the work I'd been doing on myself, that's what felt most important. I was not willing to allow someone else's narrative to put a shroud of shame on me. I felt that coming to the table to tell my story was imperative. Besides, I couldn't ask others to tell their truths at the red table and not do the same. This was not supposed to be psychodrama. My narrative would encapsulate 1. How the entanglement happened when Will and I were separated. 2. How it had been over for nearly 2 years. 3. How there were no secrets whatsoever between Will and me, so there was no cheating. When I told Will what I was planning to do, he, by his own choice, without any prompt or request from me, decided to join me at the table. Frankly, I was surprised, pleasantly so, considering we weren't together and given where we were sitting in our relationship at the time. That was unexpected. But he suggested that he did not want me to go to the table alone. That seemed to me to be a powerful offering, in line with our intention to be more of a united front. In our life partnership, spiritual partnership, we don't know what the hell this is yet partnership, we weren't quite fully united, but we were working on it. The not quite there yet part became glaringly apparent when we sat for that conversation and the camera started rolling. Beforehand, Ellen had done what she usually did, and that was to pre-interview guests. Will and I were in agreement that we would come to the table to talk about what our journey had been. We were going to honor our life partnership, yet speak openly and honestly about how that partnership had changed and how we were still figuring it out. We wanted to say that divorce wasn't an option and that family would remain our top priority. The timing for our shoot wasn't optimal. It was late. Will had just returned from a trip, and we were going to leave for a family event the next day, On top of that, our set had been taken down for the season, so we had to reset cameras and lighting, which took much longer than planned. Once the conversation finally started, now very late at night, we began with ease. But midway through the table talk, I could feel the conversation beginning to turn. Although at this point Will had been free as a bird for the last 4 years, living his life on his own terms, he seemed to convey that he had been done wrong. At my reference to having had an entanglement, he sternly reframed it with a laugh as a relationship. This came across as if this had all been a secret to him, when that wasn't true, and that he had somehow found out about my relationship as if I had not told him about it. Here's where I should have stopped the conversation, but instead, my habit of self-betrayal overwhelmed me, and I swallowed my own voice. After a few more failed attempts at regaining the narrative, I resigned and abandoned the purpose of why I had come to the table in the first place, to tell my truth and to show how we were in partnership in working through being separated but not divorced. Of course, I did what I was trying never to do again, that is, fall right into my martyrdom bag. It was clear that Will and I were no longer in alignment, that the train had gone off the track. Because I didn't want to oppose Will publicly, in my codependent way, I took the blame and played the pleasing and appeasing role I knew so well. This trauma reaction was an old friend I thought I'd kicked to the curb. But clearly, it could still be activated when I was in fear of being abandoned or not feeling protected. I wonder if Will was feeling the same way. It was hard to tell, with him sitting there with his tired, watery, weepy eyes. To be fair, Will's eyes water all the time, and it was very late. Child, unhealed trauma will do you dirty, every time. Despite how its remedies and responses wear the guise of being appropriate, caring, loving, familiar, and safe. You would have thought after all the intense work I'd been doing on myself, through therapy and spiritual focus, that a car crash of this nature would be avoidable. But another aspect of my lack of self-worth revealed itself that day. No matter what, I was not going to throw anybody under the red table but myself, even if it meant wearing the scarlet letter. And then there was my street code that came into play. This was my mess, so it was my bid to serve. To do anything other than taking the blame felt equivalent to going to Miami, getting 10 keys of cocaine, and driving back across the Maryland state line, then getting caught, only to snitch on my homie in Miami to soften my consequences. That was not an option. So I decided to do my time. Will jokingly referred to himself as the man who stood by his woman on the steps of the courthouse after she was tarnished by her transgressions. I understood that the situation was humiliating for him, and that was never my intention. Will managed to inject humor into the conversation, enough so that by the end, we could fist bump to our slogan of, "We ride together, we die together. Bad marriage for life." It said so much when at the very end, Will got in a final stinger, laughing but truly serious. He proclaimed that we were okay, but with the caveat, "I'ma get you back first." Laughing but serious myself, I interrupted with a rebuttal of, "You gonna get me back?" "I think you've gotten me back. We're good on that." In that moment, at least, my voice returned as I took a more honest stand on my own behalf, knowing all that had transpired between us. When the time came to post the conversation, I could have decided against it. Many implored me not to put it out. Miguel simply said, "You're giving the message that it's all you, and that's not true. You're going to take a big hit for this. It's my mess, so it's my hit to take." Ellen wasn't as adamant as Miguel, but she suggested that I sit on the video for a bit and maybe return to the table alone, as I'd originally intended. I honestly just wanted it over. If that meant taking the hit so we could move on, cool. So I told Ellen, no, I think we should put out what we have. Once everything settled, I had to sit with my feelings of genuine hurt and betrayal. Even if part of that betrayal was on me, it felt unfair. The loneliness that soon set in was excruciating. Would I have chosen otherwise if I had it all to do again? Yes and no. Yes, if I could have revisited it, I would not have gone to the table so ill-prepared. But no, I learned everything I needed to know about myself and more from going to that table ill-prepared. Being as hard-headed as I can be, I know that without the experience, there were things I would not have seen about myself or others that the red table revealed. Besides, I met a fierce warrior within myself during this time. She had been in hiding, but now she was willing to go into the arena and battle shame. And for that, it was all worth it. A part of me was willing to be torched by public opinion as a path to discovering my authentic value and the embers of what remained. If I could survive telling the truth while also taking the brunt of a lie, I could finally let go of all the pictures that I thought defined my worth. I knew, as painful as the journey would be, this was my opportunity to let go of self-judgment, without which other people's judgment has no power. With this, I would truly be free. I was torching the handmade gilded cage in front of the world, once and for all. When I look back at all of this, I have to laugh. One thing is for sure, neither Will nor I, in all our splendid dysfunction, was at all equipped for that conversation at that time. We were a classic comedic mess. In the aftermath, everything felt like it was the end of the world. But as Ruby Dee said, laugh now because you are going to laugh later. Thank God that's true. Oh, and I had to laugh after a prophetic dream I had in this time period. In it, I was attending a function, and no one would speak to me. I would walk up to people I knew, and they'd act like I was a stranger. In the dream, I called Will and said, "Why did you do that to me? Why would you ever do that to me?" While I continued to rant, Will waited patiently and finally replied, "The bigger question is, why would you do that to yourself? It's your show. You didn't have to put it out." What did he say? All of a sudden, my arms bulged into huge muscles, and my entire body burst into the form of a grotesque werewolf, and I snatched Will by the top of his head through the phone receiver and delivered us both into a setting of a dark forest under a full moon. As a gray, grotesque werewolf, I stood over him at 10 feet tall, panting and salivating, staring him down. He started to speak, and within seconds, my claws ripped him to shreds. And then I devoured him. I howled to the moon with blood dripping from my jaws, and then I looked to the ground to find the one thing that was left of him: a bloody, severed index finger.